Unions are known all around the world, and many of us are members. But do unions actually increase wages? With me to discuss this question is David Seymour from the Frontier Center for Public Policy.
Hi.
David, what purposes can unions serve?
Well, let's start by saying that unions can perform important functions in any economy. They can help workers understand what a good deal is, for example, because a worker might not know what a fair wage is for a particular situation. And in that case, if the worker bids too high, they might lose their job, but if they set it too low, then they lose a lot of income. And the worker may only have one chance to get that right before they go broke. So by negotiating set rates for a type of work, a union can reduce risk for a worker. Unions can also provide services such as legal representation during disputes and relief during times of misfortune, effectively acting like a kind of insurance company in the workplace.
Unions allow workers to pool resources for negotiating with employers and dealing with adverse events. But what about raising wages?
Well, in the short term, for workers who benefit from a collective agreement, that's often the case. But the real issue is whether unions raise the wage of the average worker in the long term.
Okay, so how is that different?
Well, if a union increases wages by preventing other workers from competing for the job, but the workers are not actually producing more, then any wage increases are gained at the expense of other workers' jobs.
What exactly do you mean by preventing other workers from competing?
Well, the most obvious example is compulsory membership. A worker paid less in another job might see it as a promotion to come and undercut the union rate in a workplace. But with compulsory membership, they can't do that because the employer isn't prepared to pay them at the union rate. Of course, there are also numerous reports of less savory intimidation tactics too.
So it's a case of fewer jobs for higher wages. One solution would be to support those who miss out on jobs with employment insurance.
Yeah, and the problem there is that employment assistance has to be paid out of taxes by those who are working. So this merely shifts the cost onto them. The result is that some people are being paid for not working, so the overall wealth and production goes down, as does the average wage by necessity. Either way, both the employed and the unemployed are worse off because of job losses in that scenario.
Some might say, though, that a unionized environment is still better for social justice in the workplace.
Well, they might, but then you have to remember that workers are also consumers. In fact, most people work precisely so that they can be consumers.
I'm not sure I see the connection.
Well, when only union members can bid for a job, labor costs for the goods produced are higher than they would be if there was open competition for the jobs. So the second thing that happens is that the price of those goods has to go up. Now, if you happen to get the wage increase, but you don't actually buy much of the product you produce, then you can end up a lot better off, at least in the short term. However, if you don't benefit from the wage increase, but you do buy the products of those who do, then you're actually worse off in terms of what you can buy. The net result is a transfer of wealth from the average worker to those who particularly benefit from union-driven wage increases.
If we accept that, then wouldn't it be fair to unionize everybody? Then everybody would benefit equally from this effect.
Well, that works for a while. It may seem that way, but there are two problems ultimately. First of all, the reward for work would then come to depend on who has the most political muscle rather than who produces the most wealth. And as a result, you get more politics but less actual production. But the second problem is that even if there was some fair way to spread those rewards out, no one would actually be better off because the prices of goods would go up just as much as the wages.
But workers' wages aren't the only cost you pay when you buy goods. It seems that what you aren't saying is that some of the additional costs will be absorbed by investors.
Well, that's true in the short run. Some of the wage increase will be funded by a reduction in investors' profits, but that's not sustainable.
Why not?
Well, because people who invest in companies are basically like highly paid workers. They can survive with less income than they have, so if conditions go sour, they'll just work less. In the case of investors, they're going to invest less. Now, investors may or may not be greedy, but they certainly aren't stupid. If they can't make a profit, then they're not going to invest in the long run. With less investment, of course, workers have less technology and fewer resources with which to produce goods. The ironic result is that by forcibly pushing up the cost of labor in the short run, the real production and therefore real wages decline over time.
But they will still have to invest at some level.
Well, at some level, yes, but the net effect of unions artificially pushing up wages is going to be less reinvestment. Therefore, less capital for workers to work with, less production, and ultimately, less things to buy.
If unions don't raise wages, why have we seen such a dramatic increase in workers' wages throughout recent history? Are you suggesting this has all been a coincidence?
Well, yes, and we have to look at exactly what things have coincided. It's important to be careful not to equate correlation with causation. Just because B happens after A doesn't mean that A actually caused B. The increase in the quantity of a good or service that your wages can purchase occurred because of gains in productivity. Farm workers may find that they can produce more grain by using better machinery, retail store workers may become more productive by specializing, and clothing workers may become more efficient by using large-scale assembly lines and so on. When a worker or producer finds a more efficient way to produce something, he or she is able to produce more of it for the same cost or for the same amount for a lower cost. Wages have not increased because of coercive union negotiation, but because of higher productivity. Unions can offer valuable services to members, but trying to exclude non-members from the workplace disadvantages everybody in the long term.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
To summarize, when unions raise wages without increasing worker productivity, they do so at the expense of everybody who buys the goods their members produce. Workers are also consumers, so higher wages harm workers by increasing prices. Union wage increases can cause capital flight and unemployment, which harms all workers in the long term. In the next episode, we look at the assault on saving. People who accumulate wealth are often seen as selfish and treated like pariahs. But do these financial squirrels perform a public good? Thanks for watching. I'm Jamie Stevenson for On the Other Hand.